Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of Suez Town Council, Monday, March 21st, 2016 at 9 a.m. in Council Chambers. So I called the meeting to order. Are there any introduction of late items? No. So could we have someone adopt the agenda as, Rhodes Campbell? All in favor? Thank you. No delegations today. And so our first item is under business, and it would be the Community Services Grant applications. Mr. Romanko.
Thank you, Mayor McCordoff. The Community Services Grant applications were reviewed and recommendations are being brought forward for Council's information. The intention of bringing this to Committee of the Whole is to provide information on the grant applications and the Committee's rationale for the recommendation. The intention of the meeting is not to debate the amount of allocation or the merits of the project. Any debate on the recommendations and changes to the recommendations need to occur at the regular meeting of Council. The allocated budget for the Community Services Grant applications for 2016 was approved for $64,000. The budget for $60,000, which includes $2,000 for sports teams and $4,000 for the environmental initiatives. Our total request for 2016 was $80,126. The applications are grouped into different categories, which included approved support, traditional support, and new requests. Sport teams funding was already approved by Council and provided to the minor hockey team traveling to provincials, and also to the high school senior boys basketball team. Council awarded a total of $1,000 to these teams, and there are $1,000 remaining in that category. Last year, we allocated the entire budget as we tried our best to provide funding to all local groups. Attached are the committee's recommendations for the year. In making these recommendations, the committee followed the grant criteria and eligibility parameters that are included in the Community Services Grants policy. And you've got a spreadsheet attached that allocates, that shows all the allocations, who applied, what their projects were, the amount requested, if they've received a grant in 2015, and the amount, and the recommendation for 2016 allocation. And as additional information, if Council agrees to provide support for the Desert Park Society and the Water Quality Society projects, these funding these projects could come out of the Resort Municipality Program funds. Two options are being presented. First being send the recommendations back to the committee to seek out additional project-related information. Second, provide direction by resolution that the recommendations of the committee be placed on the agenda for either the March 21st or the April 4th Council meeting agenda. There is some flexibility to discuss allocating different amounts to recipients, not to provide funding to the recommended groups or allocate funding to groups that didn't receive funding. In past, Council has kept funds for future requests that may come later in the year. Even though the balance remaining shows $1,099, $1,000 of this balance is for the remaining provincial teams fund. Staff would like direction to move forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davis is not here today, and he and Councillor King looked at this at this table that we have here, and so I'm going to ask Councillor King if he has any comments to add to this.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we went through this very diligently, and as you heard, there was over 80,000 in requests, and we had 64,000 to sort of dish out. We did also receive a letter lobbying for some extra money, and at the time when we did the grant process, I wasn't, and I don't think Mr. Davis is aware of the Resort Municipal Program funds, that we might be able to move 4,000 into that program and maybe support some of these groups to a little higher amount so they can be very successful in what they're proceeding to do. I see Council kind of recommends number one. I'd actually like to move number two, that we move this to this afternoon unless you feel you need more information so we could actually make a decision so these people could move forward with their funding.
So you're recommending, you're making a motion to adopt number two?
Yes.
Is there anyone who would like to second that motion? Councillor Youngberg. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to it? I guess my only concern was, do we ask, looking at number 1, do we ask for some additional, an additional meeting before we deal with this afternoon? And that was my only thought, but I'm not strong one way or the other. Councillor Rhodes?
Just a question for Councillor King. Is there some urgency to do it today?
Not necessarily. You could do it April 4th, and that would give us time to review the other information. I'd just like to see it move forward.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there was any of the requests that were time sensitive. I know we got a last minute.
Well, I guess with this last minute letter, and this shouldn't just be the only one we look at because other people could have lobbied the same. This implies for this organization to start, they need this equipment ASP.
And what repercussions would there be waiting until the next meeting?
I'm only can go on the letter. If they don't have the equipment on time, then the season wouldn't start.
Okay.
So it looks like we, the sort of the two options suggested are either to deal with it this afternoon on the agenda, or leave it until April the 4th, which is 2 weeks' time. Councillor Campbell?
Will there be an opportunity if we bring it into this afternoon's meeting to make changes or adjustments?
Yep. That's when we can do that.
Then I support that.
So you have suggested option number 2 with placing it on the agenda for March the 21st. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the motion.
Okay, so March 21st. Councillor Youngberg, you're okay with that? You seconded it. Are we ready for the question then? Okay, all in favor of doing it this afternoon? Thank you very much. That will be moved to the agenda later.
You said there wasn't much this afternoon, so we have to put some on it.
A short agenda, yes. Okay. Next on our agenda is the proposed creation of a local improvement municipal property owner cost-sharing policy. Mr. Dinwiddie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Currently, there are 2 local improvement projects that are noted in our 5-year capital plan. These projects are the reconstruction of Harbor Quay and Jasmine Drive. Local residents have requested improvement to these non-arterial roads, and their redevelopment continues to be pushed back due to other road projects that are arterial or feeder roads. Arterial or feeder roads are subject to more community-based traffic, therefore the basis for providing priority community investment upgrades are based on the concept that wider community uses the roads, so the community should make more investment into these roads. Neighborhood roads generally serve the local neighborhood, so improvements serve a small amount of the community and add value to the area and the property. Our 5-year capital plan also notes future investment in other arterial roads, and other arterial roads will need investment to maintain a high-quality arterial road travel network. Having a policy will enable administration to adequately plan for arterial road redevelopment with council direction on the future funding of neighborhood roads. Presently, the town of Osoyoos does not have a policy outlining cost sharing between the municipality and property owners for various types of local improvement projects. Local improvements typically comprise road-related works representing a higher standard. The most common local improvement projects involve upgrading a local rural road to an urban standard, including curb and gutter, drainage, sidewalks, roadway paving, landscaping, and streetlight installation. Having a policy on neighborhood road improvements will enable council to provide consistent decision-making and a clear message to residents that cost-sharing investment is needed for neighborhood road improvements. Local improvement projects can be initiated by either the municipality or by the property owners. For sidewalk, curb and gutter, storm and drainage, roadway paving, streetlights, etc., the individual portions of the owner's shares for each property is determined by the proportional length of the abutting property lines for the benefiting property. Notices are prepared and sent to the owners for each benefiting property, outlining the proposed work, their estimated share of the costs, and the protocol for making payment and/or petitioning for the cancellation of the project. Following distribution of the notices, there will be a petition period. If the majority of the benefiting petitioning properties petitioned against the proposed works during this period, the project will not proceed. Owners are typically given the option of paying a lump sum or amortizing the amount given over a given number of years for any work project approved to proceed. For one-side-only sidewalks, the costs are apportioned 2/3 to the property abutting the sidewalk and 1/3 to the property on the other side of the road from the new sidewalk. An analysis of numerous communities in the Lower Mainland and West Kootenay areas resulted in the creation of the following chart, which illustrates the proposed allocation of costs for various classes of work. And the community surveyed were Delta, Richmond, New Westminster, Surrey, the City of Langley, the Township of Langley, Port Coquitlam, and the City of Nelson. The classification of work are for street construction, it's usually 50% of each separate parcel of land benefiting the work, sidewalk 50%, curb and gutter 50%, storm drainage 50%, retaining walls and handrails 50%, ornamental street lighting is usually 67% for each separate parcel of land benefiting from the work, and landscaping, usually better trees, bigger trees, that sort of thing, is 100% of each separate parcel of land benefiting from the work. There are three options for council: that council approve suggested local improvement municipal property owner cost sharing policy and direct staff to create a formal policy for consideration; that council does not approve the recommended updates to the local improvement municipal property owner cost sharing policy; or the council requests additional information prior to making a decision. Administration recommends that council adopt option number 1.
Thank you very much. This definitely has been a topic that's been brought up several times, and there have been people that have asked us to look at that, at redoing their roads and with sidewalks and so on. And when we have other roads that are definitely of a higher priority, these tend to go to the bottom of the pile, and understandably. So I think that this is a good start to see if anybody would like to pursue this a little further. So, Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you. Basically ditto everything the mayor said. I do have a couple of questions, though. The Jasmine Drive situation, we have already received almost a total consensus on that. Some years ago we did, so that would be our starting point with that particular project.
Well, I believe that is, like I said, it is a project that has been on the books for quite some time.
Yeah.
So if we were to create this policy, then I think what we would do is we'd have to, create the information package for the residents and then petition them to make sure that, the majority of the people wanted it. We'd have to confirm that that is what they still wanted, because it could be possible that maybe residents have changed over the years on Jasmine Drive, and maybe somebody who lived there back in the day has moved and somebody else is there now.
And also the harbor key one you made reference to. I understand, how the whole process would work in there, but I think there's a lot of situations in there that are perhaps a little bit more than just the aesthetics of replacing the road and that kind of thing, like some swelling coming up from the lake and that kind of thing. Do those kind of situations change those percentage ratios that you have? Because they're kind of based on local improvements and that kind of thing. I think there's a bigger issue on Harbor Key.
If it was necessary, we could get some geotechnical information for that area, and if the lake is causing problems to the road that really isn't the resident's fault or anything like that, that's something we would have to look at separately. It wouldn't be a local improvement then, I don't think. It would be something we may have to repair just so that the drainage works properly, or from a safety point of view.
Yeah.
But we'd have to actually get more information about Harbor Key.
Yeah, so that kind of situation would not be considered as a local improvement?
I don't think so. I think in that case it would be more of a, like I said, traffic safety point of view, and from providing utility services to the people. If the ground is moving that much, possibly causing waterline breaks and stuff like that, that's something we'd have to look at separately from being a local improvement.
Great. Thanks.
I think there's pooling too. There's puddles on the road, so there's obviously
I've been made aware that there's some. They have some concerns about surface drainage. But,
Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to get clarity. Is this policy just if residents request sidewalks or improvements, or does this impact if in our budget we decide to do a road?
No, it says if the municipality or the residents decide. So if we decide that we're going to do Harbor Key or something like that, maybe we'd hopefully be able to cost share.
Well, I guess it wouldn't go back. I mean, I just relate
Yeah.
to the street back here. We're doing 3 roads here. Technically, if this policy would have been in place, we would have had to send out notice, and they would have to pay for half all that work?
No, because this is an arterial road. This is it's a bigger road, and it wasn't built to urban standards. So we're talking. This policy is basically for the neighborhood roads, so the smaller streets in town that usually only take the neighborhood traffic. These roads, 74th Avenue, 68th Avenue, they're the bigger arterial roads, and so they're benefiting the community as a whole, and so they would not be considered.
And do you
a
have
local
something in
improvement.
place that separates the 2 types of roads you just mentioned, or is it just a judgment call?
Well, usually arterial roads are built to a bigger standard. The road is wider, the asphalt is
Okay.
thicker, that sort of thing. So we would be able to define what type of roadway we were talking about improving. So
Okay.
typically in a neighborhood, the roads are narrower, the pavement isn't as thick. So it would be you could then define it as being a local road.
And I guess maybe you don't know the history, but I think with that Harbor Key, I know when I was lobbying to get elected, their biggest concern I always hear is the water there, that
Cooling.
the water is the biggest issue. Now we're actually throwing it back at them to cover half the cost. I just have a little concern with it.
Not necessarily. Like I said, we would have to, if we wanted to really look at Harbor Key seriously, we would have to come up with some sort of a design. We may have to do some geotechnical testing to make sure that there isn't something that we could help. I don't think there's very much storm drainage in that particular area.
There's no storm
No.
drainage.
No.
Yeah,
There is
so we would have to look at, do we want to install pipes, or are we just content with dry wells, that sort of thing.
Thank
And haven't looked at it very closely, I'll have to admit.
Councillor Youngberg, and then
Just a question.
Your
Oh,
microphone?
thank you. Just a question, Jim.
Sure.
I see that not many of the communities are smaller communities that you used as a comparison. You've used cities, and
A
I'm
lot
just
of them are.
wondering if the cost basis would be any different if we were using Oliver, Peachland.
I did ask the city of Fernie for their information. I know from past experience that their split between municipal and property owners' cost sharing is similar. Unfortunately, they didn't get back to me in time for the report. So. And Fernie's about the same size as.
And didn't touch base with Oliver, have they ever?
No, I
done?
haven't asked. I did not.
don't think Oliver would have a
I don't think they have a
policy.
policy. So.
okay,
Thank you.
Director Cunningham.
Yeah, a number of questions. We just mentioned the peculiar or particular situation of Harbor Key. So would it be possible that instead of a 50% sharing, that if in fact there was more town responsibilities regarding that road, that the percentage could go down to 25%? Maybe the policy could allow for that?
Well, I think, like anything else in terms of policy, it's open to council's discretion. And then the policy here is to try and give some direction to administration when they're dealing with the the residents. And we'd have to, there's not a lot of situations that I think we'd have to take a look at assessing the various impacts in the area. And for example, Harbor Key, the discussion there is that there's no solid ground. So we haven't even got an estimate of what it would take to make solid ground there. But again, the discretion of policy is up to council. But when we are getting requests from areas, at least with a policy in place, we could provide a standard answer and say, are you willing to make a contribution? And work from there.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
What kind of vote would be required locally for local improvement bylaw to proceed? Would it just be a simple majority of the number of households, or would it be a super majority? Would it be based on assessments? Has that determination been made? And the other question which I have is, once somebody's decided in the affirmative, would the town then have a responsibility to proceed with that project the following year in the budget? Would it get a priority in the budget setting, or would it just go into a queue like anybody else?
Well, it's 51%. is
Simple majority.
is the answer to that question. And then again, when in some particular areas we've been pushing these projects back and pushing them back, and if there is a policy and there is a willingness to cost share, then council can consider that project within the scope of its other projects. One of our major concerns administratively is that we have to plan long term for the redevelopment of our arterial roads. So if we have some kind of direction in terms of dealing with the residential roads, we can start working towards our arterial road. Looking at how we're going to make that up in our capital projects.
It becomes more palatable too that we can fit into our budget if we know that there's that we're not absorbing the entire cost.
Right.
Councillor Rhodes.
I know you're not looking for a resolution on this today, but I did want to mention that thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's a great plan. We clearly identified in the last council that it was a little bit of a weakness in our community right now, and it's a great way to, energize a specific community when they want something done, and it really, really helps out, the town budget and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of pluses to doing this kind of thing, particularly when you have a willingness from all of the residents, or at least a majority.
If the majority of the people
moving these forward,
if the majority of the people who want a particular project done, if you can get them involved, then they're much more willing to participate and usually willing to buy in to make sure that it gets done.
When would we see this at council?
Well, if council provides us direction that
you would like a more
you're supportive of developing the policy with this format, probably maybe not the next council meeting, but the meeting after that. Certainly we're targeting for having something in place for the next budget cycle, so at least if something does come up, we can send out a letter to the interested areas to see if there is something.
Councillor King?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it would be important if we move forward with this policy that you do put the amount of votes to pass it, so they say it right in black and white with this.
And typically, it's a simple majority. If you want it to be something else, we can certainly make it that way.
I think it's legislated.
Okay.
But I think it should be in this policy so they can read it black and white.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Campbell?
I'd like to propose option number 1.
And is there a seconder for that? Councillor Youngberg, thank you. Does option 1 give you enough to go on?
Yes, we would bring back a policy in a formal structure.
And then we could look at it again.
And we can look at it and see if there's some changes want to be made.
Thank you. All in favor of option 1? Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Dinwiddie, because this is something that we've been certainly talking about, so we appreciate that. Next is the Delegated Authority Bylaw, and we will let Mr. Romanko talk to this one.
Thank you. Council and administration continue to work together to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of municipal service delivery and governance through tools such as policies and bylaws. One of the tools available to municipal councils is the passing of a Delegation of Authority bylaw that enables administration to make identified decisions. Council has currently delegated authority to the CAO in a number of bylaws. The attached bylaw highlights sections of the community charter that Council can't delegate. The attached bylaw identifies some key areas that the administration is of opinion can be delegated to the mayor, CAO, and other staff. The results will be more responsive administration to everyday events and permits. These recommended areas are supplied by experiences provided in the current operations and by examples taken from other communities. The committee of the whole will provide council administration an opportunity to review each situation for additional clarity of subject matter. 3 options are put forth in front of council. 1, that council provides direction to the delegation that the Delegation of Authority bylaw be taken to the April 4th council meeting for debate and first 3 readings. 2, council denies the need for a Delegation of Authority bylaw. 3, council provides additional direction to remove action areas, make changes, or other recommendations. Staff is seeking direction on the development of a delegation of authority bylaw. So, when you look at the bylaw as a whole, as the community charter clearly outlines, there's some areas that council can't delegate. That's like making bylaws. But what we've identified here are a lot of administrative processes that, for example, the first one, letters of support to local nonprofit organizations. We get all kinds of requests like that, and usually the mayor needs to respond to them in a timely manner. Most of them are making grant applications, and consideration of a letter of support is the last thing, and it's the grant application's got to be there every day, the next day. So I don't know if council wants to walk through each one of these, and we can just briefly touch on them and see if there's any issue that council would like to address.
I think it's a good idea to go through it. Can I ask, up until now, some of these things have been handled through a bylaw delegation in certain bylaws. Am I correct?
No, we're retaining council through specific bylaws has given delegation of authority. For example, in the streets and sidewalks bylaw, I can put up signs. I can put up barriers, close roads. Those will remain. These are more administrative processes that aren't regulated by bylaw. Okay. So they're not really bylaws. They're processes that we have to go through.
I guess my concern is, when I read this, is why hasn't this been enacted before? I mean, it just has been sort of on the books for a while, and I know that from my point of view, the one thing that I deal with is letters, and I do know that that sometimes I have to go back and make sure that all of council agrees before I send the letter. Is that what kind of we're talking about? That I would miss that step in most cases.
That's right.
Unless there was something that needed to come back to council. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
You would take a look at the situation and determine whether or not it would be in the best interest of council to support that particular application. Like anything within these bylaws, although the delegation of authority is there, it's usually there for the kind of the situations that don't have, for lack of a better term, nuances. And if there was a situation where myself or the other administration felt, well, this is not just a clear-cut situation. We need some type of direction from council. We could still get that take this back to council and seek that direction.
And would you automatically send something to council and say, we've done this and this and this, and if we had a concern, we could ask, or how does that work? I mean, I'm just wondering. To me, I totally agree that this is more expedient, makes sense. I'm just wondering why it's all of a sudden coming now. I guess that's...
Well, it's been on the books for a while. It is more effective, efficient governance, and the feeling is that we've finally been able to pull together some areas to bring to council to see if this is the way the council would like to go. Again, within kind of backing a bylaw could be policy. And so, although the bylaw would be very specific to the delegation in this particular area, if council wants some specific type of communication about any one of these areas, we could highlight that, and then we could build policy behind it to say, if we make this decision, we bring back and inform council about this decision. But that really doesn't have to go in the bylaw as much as policy.
Okay. So what you're suggesting is that we go through everything on Schedule A just briefly? Is that
Yes.
agreeable with?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead with that.
Okay, so the first one I think is pretty well self-explanatory relative to the number of.
Sorry, I do have a question about that. I know it says nonprofit. Who determines other letters of support? Will they all come to council? Because we get asked frequently to support, for example, the water company east of us here and that type of thing.
Well, I think this is looking more at societies. And the reference to a nonprofit would be when a society is looking for some type of support. But if it's again, it's not a society, a nonprofit organization, it would come to council.
Yeah, because sometimes you during the vetting and debate process, you bring forward lots of things that are pertinent to that, rather than just typing out the letter and signing. And I'd want to make sure that they still come to council for debate.
Again, the schedule notes that it's to seek grant funding for, and we could put down nonprofit society. Then they have to have a society's number.
Yeah, that would be good.
And oftentimes we get asked to support things, and I guess what like the Cancer Society, like those are the kinds of things, and they're fairly routine. I would think. I don't think there wouldn't be much to debate. But sometimes we get asked for things that are not local, and so we look at those things carefully and don't always support it. If it's something that's local or something that's meaningful to our community, then we'll consider it. But when it's somebody out of Vancouver wanting us to support something, we don't normally do that because doesn't pertain to us. Now, does that?
This does say the town, to enhance the town.
Yeah.
So it'd be a local nonprofit. I think it's pretty self-explanatory personally, but it was for a for-profit that wanted some support, then I believe it would definitely have to come in front of council.
Yeah.
And I think it states that here separate.
Yeah, anybody that's wanting money or support in that way, I think it probably should come to council.
Yeah, this is
I think these are just, my thinking is they're just letters of saying, yes, we support this being, Daffodil Week or something.
That was my question, actually. This is strictly letters of support, not funding requests.
Right.
I'm sorry. I got pulled away.
Sorry. So the first item here relates to letters of support, not financial support.
That's right. Letters of
Okay.
support.
Yeah, definitely.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. You okay with that?
The mayor could, through some discretion process, say this should go to council law.
Absolutely.
That's
yeah.
I
Could say stop. We need to.
If I think it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have to sign the letter.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
The second one is a delegation to the CAO to hire, terminate, or suspend any employee, but for clarity, not including any officer. That's currently in my job description, but it's more a real delegated authority when it's in bylaw as opposed to in my job description. And the second part, to make adjustments to rates of pay within the pay range for each position approved by council. So council is still approving the pay range, provides some flexibility where we have, a situation that we've come across is that when an employee is getting a benefit and that benefit is due to age or something like that, is no longer available to that employee, then allows me to make the decision to provide that same amount of benefit into their pay, so that doesn't come to council. Mm-hmm. So that's what this particular one is.
We've done that a couple times, haven't we?
Yeah. So any of those scenarios wouldn't affect budget anyways.
No. It's all based on council's approval of the overall cost that's in the budget.
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That would make
Okay.
sense.
The second one, expend funds above 30,000 on equipment or services in an emergency situation. That isn't my job description now, but again, provides more authority and direction when it's in the bylaw. Land title covenants, and these next three I'm not that familiar with, but certainly the director of planning would be able to speak to them in terms of some of the business that they carry out with statutory right-of-ways and easement agreements.
Okay, sorry, I could, for instance.
I don't know, Lan, you may have to come closer to the mic.
Yeah.
Explain an example of land title covenant. That's, for instance, where we have certain conditional uses, like the marijuana. We have provisions for that in our zoning bylaw, but there's certain conditions that council would have to agree to at the zoning stage for that to operate. And so that would be a council decision, but then I'm assuming from this that the placement of the covenant on the property would be Barry's or my responsibility, and also the monitoring of it. Okay, but council has made the decision in the first place.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Would there be a need to maybe put one or two minor sentences in each one of these next three so it kind of explains it a little bit from what you just said? Like each one kind of has a little definition. And I don't know if that would be easy to do or not.
Well, that would be up to Jeanette, but I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd like to see then on
Okay.
those three as we move forward.
Or even an example or something of what that means. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't cite an example.
I wouldn't
in a
put an
Okay.
bylaw.
example, but
Two.
a couple little sentences that relates.
Okay.
Your Fair Water Service
You're about
Agreement.
3 hours early.
I was told 10 o'clock.
4.5 hours early.
Welcome.
Water Service Agreement, you're right on time.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything on statutory right-of-ways that, besides providing an explanation and easement agreements as well?
I think with all three, we're talking about the same thing, as I
Yeah.
understand it, where council's already approved the project, but it's the particulars, correct? Correct.
Okay.
Well, not all the
Maybe
time.
not.
For example, when we recently had to do an easement agreement for Fortis to go through to provide power into the, from Spartan Drive to the Gyro Park. We have to take those types of requests to council as opposed to us just signing off on the easement agreements.
There could be situations, for instance, subdivisions where I'm the subdivision approving officer, so that doesn't go to council, but there could be an easement agreement associated with that for water or sewer servicing. That's an example of a negative easement. Of a positive one. There could be negative ones as well, which would come up. For instance, somebody was interested in reprofiling the land, which would cause a nuisance to the adjoining property owner by piling their soil up. So we could actually, usually we just say, please don't do that, and that's sufficient. But if we had any concerns at all, then we could put a negative easement agreement on the property to the effect that they're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Water service agreements within the municipal or irrigation district. Right now, we have policy. We actually have bylaw relative to what the costs are and how costs are attributed. But when we actually do the agreement has to be approved by council. Because we have bylaw already, this will give us signing authority on the agreement as long as we follow what the direction of the costing is.
Okay.
And that's the same for sewer.
And Barry, then, can I just interrupt, sorry? Then these last five, are you going to put a little meat in these boxes so we don't have to memorize everything you're saying?
Well, what I can do
Or
is
just relate to a bylaw number or something?
I can try and define
Yeah, that's what I'm
what a
Yeah.
water service agreement
Okay.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And the same thing with license of occupation. This is short-term agreements. I don't know that we have I know we have a 5-year license of occupation with Desert Park, something like that. We would take to council something of a short-term nature. I don't know off the top of my head if we've dealt with one recently, but it's more of the short term where we're not giving up the use of the land for a long period of time.
The province also issues license of occupation, but in those particular case, like for instance for the marina, we'd be paying some money for that, for the right to use that water, and because there's money attached to it, that would have to come to council.
Okay.
And what defines short-term and long-term?
We can define that.
Okay.
As a length of time.
Well, I know, but is it 3 years or 7 years?
Yeah. For example, our marina people who rent stalls from us from the marina, that's a license of occupation because they have specific use for that stall.
And it's for 1 year at a time.
No, it's
forever.
That's 40 years.
Yeah, that's what.
I mean
Each individual.
Each individual.
That's different.
Yeah, and so now they're in a 3-year agreement with us.
And I guess that's all I'm saying. More likely, short term is maybe 3 and under, or 2 and under, whatever. Is policy around that?
Yeah.
I just.
Renewal of employment agreements, including QP collective agreements. So sometimes we have to make all our employment agreements are continuous, but if we have to make some administrative changes to them based on age or something like that, then we would just make the changes and I would sign off on them. Development servicing agreements, unless... I'm
Excuse
sorry?
me, Councillor Campbell?
Just roads.
Roads?
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at both.
Those QP changes that you made reference to, would that include...
Excluding QP.
Oh, pardon me, okay. Now, the stuff that you were talking about, would council receive a report from you about those changes?
We could, yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be quite important in this particular case because it's valuable knowledge that, not to stop the process, but it would be nice to know of those changes.
Okay, so I could make that a general statement that anything to do with employment contracts that I would have the authority, or the CAO would have the authority, but that the report would be provided to council.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
I think that's better because sometimes we get asked about things and if we don't know, we can't. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Development servicing agreements unless budget funds are impacted.
Yeah,
Okay.
I could talk to that one, yeah. For instance, it could be a development and we require them to build an off-site service, let's say a sidewalk adjoining their property. That's something I think that staff could authorize. But if there's any issue, in fact, where there's town monies are involved, let's say they have to put in or redo a road right next to their development property, and there's an agreement that they're going to pay half and the town's going to pay the other half, then that has to come to council.
Okay.
And there's a policy in place already around that services agreement?
No, there's not. Servicing agreements are something which are quite new for us. Typically before, you have to go through the file, and there would be a series of letters from our engineers saying that this was their obligation, that was their obligation. So I instituted that system about 4 or 5 years ago, and so for all major projects since then, we've been requiring it. But there's not a piece of paper per se. No.
So would it be beneficial to have a piece of paper in place?
I absolutely would.
Can we move that comment forward then?
Okay. Next one is to contract supplier services for goods for any amount, subject to funding contained within the approved budget. I think this is one that is one we deal with most, where council approves a budget for capital improvements. We go to the tender process, we get tenders in, and then we have to wait sometimes up to 2 to 3 weeks, based on the next council meeting, to approve tenders that in fact are under budget. So this would allow us, if the capital project is in the budget, monies have been identified, the tenders come under budget, and in this particular case also that we're providing it to the lowest bidder, that we would be able to sign off the contracts and in some situations save 2 or 3 weeks in terms of the process.
That makes sense to me. If there's a concern about it, then it needs to come too.
Yeah, we can, and again, we can provide counsel, for example, just using what we're dealing with now at 74th Avenue, we would, we had a budgeted amount, all the tenders came in under budget, and we had to wait for 2 weeks for council to meet again to approve numbers or tenders that were under budget.
Although, to be fair, we can do a pre-budget approval, can't we?
That's different.
Yeah.
That's different.
Okay, so we can say we need to get this started, and we've done that with a few projects.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's a pre-budget approval as opposed to a general budgeting in a project implementation process.
Councillor Rhodes.
So obviously you put a lot of thought into this particular section there. Are there any pitfalls or negative aspects to doing this? That seems like a pretty big change to me from, I get the delay period how it can affect that, but, I've always liked to be involved in that process. So.
I guess to me the big decision was made when the budget was approved. After that, it's a matter of we go through a normal tendering process, and that if the tenders come under budget and we're picking the lowest tender, lowest company bid, I guess my question is, what is the involvement council wants? What do you gain from that particular? Because we could report on the decision if that's part of the process.
The knowledge that I get from it myself is that it's the final part of the process. You get to see who bid on it and who was awarded and why they were given that, and that's always been a pretty important part of one of my functions, and I don't know, I've always enjoyed that particular part of it. Now I could see that being gone, except for after the fact reporting, I guess.
I think having it reported is important, especially if there are RFPs and they all come in, and that's what we would go with. But if there are some local groups friends, neighbors, who say, gee, I put in, for us to say, well, we really didn't have any say in it because they were all under budget, is probably not good for us. So I kind of agree with Councillor Rhodes that it's a pretty. I don't even mind if you say this is what we've got, and this is what came in. Here's the report, and this is who we're going with. Just a matter of having us know what it is, and I hate to lose that only because we're the ones that get asked about why.
Well, I guess. You can't have it both ways. Which way you're going to go, because we can, when the tenders come in, once it's all reviewed, and if it is the lowest bidder, if it's not the lowest bidder, then that would be contrary to policy.
Absolutely.
So we would be seeking a direction from council with a report as to why we don't want to go with the lowest bidder, but. You still would get a report on who bid,
okay,
and you allocated the money, and in the governance learnings that I've taken, the instructors call that, for lack of a better term, warm tummy information. This is business. If we are going to go off of a tender, off of a bid, we better have a very good reason. I know that in the past, local bidding has been an issue. Well, in most situations, we can't do that. It's contrary to what the tendering process is.
And I totally understand that. I guess it's just a bit of a shift away from what we've been used to, and that's so Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Rhodes.
Just a couple of things. I think, as we discussed at a previous point too, even being in the know ahead of time and being able to answer questions to the public. But I guess my question is, historically, how many recommendations from an RFP process has council changed or not agreed to admin's recommendations? Or does it? Has it happened?
In terms of tendering, I in the 7 years I've been here, all the tenders have gone through. There's never been one that there's been debate about local contractors, but when it finally falls out, you have to go with the tendering process. I guess my question is, what is the fear? Because that is the ultimately what council wants to put administrative processes in place for. What is the fear? Can I answer the fear?
Councillor Rhodes, then Director Cunningham.
Well, I guess that I'm not resistant to change, but this is an important part of the process that I go through as a councillor, and I find it valuable in a public regular meeting to go through that process because we've been a part of it right up to the end, and this is how you kind of finish it off. The term, warm tummy feeling, well, absolutely, but sometimes that's a good thing to search for and to have. I would, I know we have not specifically turned down tenders, and that might be a reason to introduce this into it. But similarly, what if it was, a 3 or 4 or 5% difference between the two lowest bidders, and you would select the lowest bidder, and the second lowest that was very close in the pricing was a local company. I'd like that opportunity to fight and argue for that company, and I see that being somewhat removed out of the process if you award it prior to that. I can say that it has not happened, but it could happen.
Again, that particular scenario, we're governed by contract law. That you can fight and argue all you want, unless you're willing to go to court. That particular lowest bidder has got legal, on a tender, has got a legal right, unless there are some very specific conditions that you can identify that would not allow you to accept the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
I understand the legality of it, but it eliminates the opportunity to rant and rave about it at a time that it's important. Well, I know
that's why we're here.
And those kind of things for me personally as a councillor are very important.
I get it. Director Cunningham.
Yeah, we've been using terminology, RFPs and tenders interchangeably, and they're not. I think we're talking about tenders here because they're subject to a strict competitive process. RFPs can include subjective considerations, and I would argue that those should be coming to council. Let's say for RFP for consultants, and you just don't look at the bottom line in terms of their budgets, but you look at the quality, for instance, of the consultant team. And council have made decisions.
Yeah.
Quite recently, for instance, with the Parks and Trails plan, where actually the person who was selected was the highest bidder.
Well, and again, not to sound argumentative with the staff, is that if the RFP number came in was not the lowest bidder, we would be bringing it back to council. But if it's the lowest bidder, even an RFP, why would we bring it back to council?
Okay, that's fine, but it
Yeah.
should say that here. I agree.
Councillor Youngberg.
Yeah, I just believe it's taking a lot of our input and our participation in the operation of the community completely away. I disagree with it. I would like it removed from here. That's my suggestion. I don't think it has to be part of this. I think it can revert right back to the way that we've always did it. Just take this little bit out of your proposal.
And that's certainly an option. Councillor Rhodes?
I was going to ask, what process do you want to go through with this? What are you looking for feedback?
Well, I'm looking for feedback, and if council wants something out, then I'd like a resolution to take it out, and then we would bring back the delegation of authority bylaw without that particular item.
And with the changes.
Yeah.
And with the changes
Yeah.
that we
Yes.
recommend.
And
Then
we'd
would
have to
probably
do that
support
anyway.
taking
Yeah.
this particular item out as well, if that's what you're looking for.
So I'm looking for a resolution to take it out.
Okay, I'll make that resolution.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Yeah.
Okay. So are we're going to continue to go through the other
Yep.
areas for sure.
Renewals of leases, land tenures, and license to occupy, provided there are no changes.
No substantive changes. What does that mean? Is that that isn't in terms of money?
No.
No, it would just be in terms of what?
The length of the lease? Or
Yeah.
Well, if the length of the lease doesn't change, or the length of the tenure doesn't change, the conditions, if the administration or the license of occupy wants to change the conditions, then they would come back. So any change in a condition would be considered substantive.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Comment?
Yes.
I guess I could see that with the land tenure and license. I guess just with the renewal lease, just to satisfy me. Substantial change, if an organization, say, has a 5-year and a 5-year option, and at the end of 10 years they have a chance to extend it another 5 and 10, isn't that a substantial change?
If they
Or
want
is that a
to,
brand new contract?
well, it's a new lease under the same conditions.
Okay, maybe they want to have 7 years and 7
Well,
years.
if they change the numbers,
then
Then
it
you'd
that's
have to
becomes-
come
substantive.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as
The other
it's
the other thing is that if there is a lease or some type of land tenure, and there's been discussion within their planning processes that there should be some changes, that those would be brought to council as well.
Okay.
Okay. Existing operating agreements with the province, again, with no substantive changes. These are permits that, fireworks permits, burning permits, goose hunting permits. These are all things we do now that are in job descriptions, but are strengthening through bylaw. Prosecution of bylaw contraventions. This is going to, if we are going to actually go to court to seek remedy on a bylaw. Referral of disputed ticket to provincial court for a hearing. Waiving of facility or program fees when it can be determined for a total community benefit. And this is one that comes up quite often, that somebody wants to rent the facility over to Sonora, and there's no real delegation of that to Director Davis or myself, and so the operative word here is for some type of total community benefit. Grant an aid to sports groups when it is of an urgent nature. For example, if council was not going to meet and the team had made provincials and they need their $500 grant, then the administration would be able to award the grant and then bring it back to council for approval in the process.
When it's within the allotted budget.
Yes.
If it was outside of that, it
That's
would
right.
have to be
Yeah,
brought back.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, and we have policy on that. And applications for funding unless a council resolution is specific criteria of the application. So
On that
Yeah.
particular one, I guess that's a pretty broad application for funding per se. I might want $20,000 and you can make that decision without our input?
Because it's under 30. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, well, this is a
Okay,
grant,
well, make
this
it
is a
40
grant
then.
application.
It just says application for funding. It
Yeah.
doesn't say a grant
Well,
application.
Yeah.
that's what it intends to say.
Well, then maybe put the word
Okay.
grant in, then it makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay,
Yeah.
then it makes sense.
Yeah, so sometimes we're applying for grants that don't need a council resolution. So just as, just to ensure that we can, we're given that authority to apply for grants.
Okay, so then I think, I was reading as though it was a public and nonprofit applying to the town. You're saying it's the town applying.
That's right.
Then maybe that should
Oh,
say the
yes.
town's applying for grant funding.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't see it that way either. Could you just adjust the wording a little bit?
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense then, totally.
All right.
Okay, so we've gone through that. With the changes, we need to, we need option 1, 2, or 3, please. Is anybody interested? Councillor Rhodes.
If I could just ask one more question.
Yeah.
I know it's a minor one. Does that authority get delegated to the acting CAO when you're?
Yes.
Yes.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Or any actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Council, what would you like to do? Which Councillor Campbell?
I would make a motion for option number 3.
Additional director remove, make changes and other recommendations. Is that what makes sense, or I thought we'd already done that?
Well, I don't think we can bring back the changes to the April 4th meeting, but we'll bring back a changed bylaw to the committee of the whole meeting, either on April 4th, or the meeting after
following
that.
one.
Yeah.
So, option 3 makes sense then?
Yes.
Okay. You're seconding that?
I'll second.
Yes? We've got it seconded. All in favor? Thank you.
I did.
Actually, it was Councillor Rhodes that seconded it before you, so.
Okay, that's fine.
We'll-
Everybody's doing everything on the right.
I know, but this afternoon I'll do it all on the left. Okay, so that's everything on the agenda. We're a little longer than we anticipated. So we need a motion to adjourn the meeting, please. Oh, I've got to go over here.
Yeah, get used to it, yeah.
Councillor King, Councillor Youngberg, you in favor of that? 1, 2, good, thank you very much, all in favor. Thank you very much, and we will take 5 minutes.
Remember their names?
So we can-
Well, he's standing there with a sign.